Hearken to this reed forlorn, breathing even since 'twas torn from its rushy bed, a strain of impassioned love and pain. The secret of my song, though near, none can see and none can hear. Oh, for a friend to know the sign, and mingle all his soul with mine. 'Tis the flame of love that fired me, 'tis the wine of love inspired me. Wouldst thou learn how lovers bleed? Hearken, hearken to the reed. These are the words of Jalaluddin Rumi, one of the most profound mystical teachers of human history. Rumi's poetry, known for its themes of love, mystical union, and spiritual intoxication, have universal appeal. However, it's important to understand that his work is deeply rooted in Islamic theology and Sufi mysticism. In this video, we'll dive into the life, poetry, and historical context of Rumi. Understanding the historical and cultural context of Rumi's life helps us appreciate the depth and richness of his literary contributions. His poetry is not just beautiful, but also a profound reflection on human existence and metaphysical reality. Jalaluddin Rumi was born in 1207. According to some sources, he was born in the city of Balkh, in modern-day Afghanistan, or according to other sources, not from Balkh itself, but from a smaller town in what is now Tajikistan. His father, Bahauddin Walad, was a respected religious scholar and mystic, which greatly influenced Rumi's upbringing. The family spoke Persian and was part of the Persianate cultural sphere. However, Rumi's family moved to Konya in present-day Turkey, where he spent most of his life. Rumi's association with Konya and the larger region of Anatolia, at that time known as Rum or Rome from the Islamic perspective, is why he is often referred to as Rumi, meaning the one from Rome. The families moved from the east to the west, including stops in Baghdad and Mecca, was likely due to a combination of political circumstances and the looming threat of the Mongol invasion. His father established himself as a religious authority there, and Rumi followed in his footsteps, becoming a prominent scholar and mystic. Bahauddin Walad, the father of Jalaluddin Rumi, passed away around 1230, shortly after the arrival in Konya. At this time, Rumi was in his 20s and already a respected teacher, but not yet ready to take on all his father's responsibilities. Fortunately, one of Bahauddin's close students, Burhanuddin Muhaqqiq, arrived in Konya and took Rumi under his wing. Burhanuddin sent Rumi to Syria to study the religious sciences such as law and theology, with renowned teachers in Aleppo and Damascus. Rumi spent significant time in Syria, becoming a significantly learned scholar. Upon his return to Konya, Burhanuddin began teaching Rumi the mystical Sufi path. Rumi underwent rigorous Sufi training, including spiritual retreats and fasting, eventually becoming an accomplished Sufi master. After Burhanuddin's death, around 1240, Rumi's training was complete, and he began his career as a renowned scholar and mystic. He was an expert in Hanafi Islamic law, gave legal opinions, taught students, and gained a favorable reputation. Rumi was known for his ability to attract people of different religious backgrounds, particularly Christians, and often led them to convert to Islam. Rumi's life took a significant turn when he met Shams Tabrizi. Originally from Tabriz in Iran, Shams was a well-educated man, contrary to the common narrative of him being an illiterate, wandering dervish. He was knowledgeable in Islamic sciences and classical Sufi literature. Shams traveled extensively, seeking a spiritual equal who could match his spiritual attainments. But it wasn't until he met Rumi in Konya that he found his true companion. Their meeting is considered one of the most significant moments in religious and literary history. Shams' influence transformed Rumi from a scholar into a great mystic. They shared a deep spiritual bond, and their relationship led to some of the greatest poetry in history, profoundly impacting Sufism and the broader Islamic world. While Rumi took Shams as his master, guiding him to full absorption in God, Shams also learned from Rumi. They were spiritual companions who lifted each other to great heights of spiritual attainment. After the arrival of Shams Tabrizi, Rumi discovered the power of music as a spiritual practice, particularly through the form known as Sama. This Sufi practice, which involves music and dance, became a significant aspect of Rumi's mysticism. Rumi, Shams, and their disciples would regularly hold these rituals, which allowed Rumi to express his mystical rapture through joyous and meditative whirling movements. During this period, Rumi began composing poetry, often to relay the teachings of Shams. Rumi's exceptional skill in communicating with the common people helped convey Shams' mystical teachings, which were otherwise difficult for many people to grasp. Since the word Shams means the sun in Arabic, Rumi saw his mission as reflecting the light of Shams, like the moon reflects the light of the sun. This is evident in his poetry, where he often refers to Shams as the sun and himself as the moon. Their close relationship, however, caused jealousy among Rumi's followers, leading to Shams' mysterious disappearance. Despite efforts to retrieve him, Shams eventually disappeared for good, leaving Rumi in deep despair. This event marked a turning point for Rumi. It was after Shams' final disappearance that Rumi composed much of the poetry for which he is famous today. Rumi's love for music is well documented. Rumi himself was a musician and played the rabab, a string instrument mentioned lovingly in many of his poems. He often moved to the music in a whirling motion, which later became a hallmark of the Mevlevi Sufi order, also known as the whirling dervishes. The Mevlevi Sufi order, which grew significantly in size and influence, continued to practice the sama and whirling dance that Rumi cherished. Rumi's literary output is impressive. It was influenced by earlier Persian Sufi poets like Sanai and Faribuddin Attar. Indeed, there is a famous story that Rumi met the poet Attar as a young boy while traveling west from Balkh with his father. Although this story is likely more legendary than historical, it highlights the deep influence of earlier Persian poets on Rumi's work. But Rumi's poetry is also highly original and unique. He had a remarkable skill for conveying the complex teachings of Islam and Sufism to a general audience, making his words accessible to people of various cultural and religious backgrounds. This was particularly useful in Konya, which as a frontier region had a large non-Muslim population and many recent converts with limited knowledge of Islam. During his lifetime, Rumi was popular and respected not only among Muslims, but also among Christians and Jews in the region. Rumi's works are masterpieces of Persian literature and continue to inspire people worldwide. They can be divided into two major works, often referred to as the Quran in Persian. The Masnavi is a six-book epic poem composed of around 25,000 verses. It is a commentary on the Quran and the teachings of Islam through the lens of Rumi's Sufism. The Masnavi addresses various religious and spiritual topics through accessible poetry, using stories, fables, and profound narratives. Rumi composed the Masnavi during the last decade of his life with the help of his disciple Hosan Chelebi, who wrote down the verses as Rumi recited them. The Divan Shams Tabrizi is a collection that contains over 5,000 poems and 45,000 verses, including ghazals and rubaiyat quatrains. The Divan is dedicated to Shams Tabrizi, with many poems either adapting Shams's poetic persona or praising him in a devotional tone. The poems explore themes such as love, which Rumi often describes as the love of God and the love that exists between God and creation. This divine love is seen as a thread that holds the cosmos together and draws the mystic towards God. In addition to his poetry, Rumi was a famous preacher, and his prose works, such as the Fatemeh.Persian, contain his sermons and discourses. These works provide important insights into his teachings and biography in a more straightforward prose form. Rumi's teachings emphasize the concept of mystical love. As a Sufi, he focused on the journey of the Sufi path, which involves ascending stations of intimacy with God, guided by a sheikh or master. The ultimate goal is to reach fana, or annihilation, in God, where the mystic becomes completely effaced in the divine reality and experiences a true oneness of existence. On the level of practice, the Sufi path involves practices like fasting, retreats, renunciation, and listening to music to transcend the self or ego. Over the course of the spiritual journey, the ego is gradually burned away until nothing remains, allowing God to appear. The spiritual journey and its profound experiences are central to Rumi's poetry and philosophy. A direct experience of God, according to Rumi, is hindered by the nafs, often translated as ego or self. The nafs represents our attachment to the idea of a separate individual self and all the desires that come with it. The attachment prevents us from experiencing the unity with God that is always present. Rumi identifies the nafs with the devil and even with hell itself. In his discourses, Rumi explains that with God, there is no room for two egos. He says, "You say I and he says I. In order for this duality to disappear, either you must die for him or he for you. It is not possible for him to die because he is the ever-living who doesn't die. Therefore, you must die so that he may be manifested to you, thus eliminating the duality." One of Rumi's central themes is the distinction between form surat and meaning ma'na. The world of multiplicity is seen as an illusion or a veil over reality, with forms hiding the meanings behind them. Most people only see the forms and not the hidden realities they point to. Ultimately, meaning is known to God, and since God is beyond multiplicity, the meaning of all things is God. Thus, behind the illusion of multiplicity, there is a unity or oneness, namely God. Rumi's metaphysics suggests that the forms of the world are manifestations of the underlying meaning. This idea is similar to Ibn Arabi's monastic worldview, where ultimately there is only God and all other things are a kind of illusion. However, Rumi is careful to maintain a distinction between God and creation, avoiding pantheism. He emphasizes that unity with God is not about God descending into the human being, but about the human being extinguishing the self to realize the unity of God. Rumi's teachings and poetry often point to a kind of monism, where the core of reality is a unity or oneness beneath the multiplicity of existence. This idea is reflected in his works, such as the Masnavi and the Divan, where he speaks of the lover and the beloved as one, and the illusion of separation. Rumi's poetry often explores the theme of transcending duality. In the opening lines of the Masnavi, known as the Song of the Reed, which I cited at the beginning of this video, Rumi uses the image of the reed or flute to symbolize the human cry of longing to reunite with God. Just as the reed longs to return to the reed bed from which it came, humans long to return to unity with God. Rumi's teachings emphasize that the knowledge and experience of God cannot be fully expressed in words or concepts. This mystical knowledge, often called marifa, is directly experienced through kashf or unveiling. This process involves removing the veils of illusion created by the independent self, leading to a direct experience of the oneness of reality. One cannot truly know God without direct experience. Love is a central metaphor for this mystical knowledge. Just as love is an experience beyond words, so is the knowledge of God. Rumi was described as a remarkably kind and loving person, even towards those of different creeds and religions. This universal love is a key aspect of his teachings and poetry, making his work accessible and inspiring to people of all backgrounds. It's important to remember, however, that Rumi was a devout Muslim who adhered to the practices expected of a Muslim, such as prayers and fasting. He emphasized the importance of following Islamic law and was an expert in Hanafi jurisprudence. Even after becoming a great mystic, he continued to give legal opinions and saw Islam as a true religion, with the Quran as the final revelation and Muhammad as the last prophet. However, Rumi was also known for his tolerance of religious differences. He avoided sectarianism, focusing instead on the inner spiritual meanings behind religious observances. He often criticized Muslims who got too caught up in the formalities of rituals while neglecting their inner meanings, which he saw as a true purpose of religion. Ultimately, Rumi saw the world as a unity, with truth being one regardless of sectarian divisions. He called on listeners to come to the place of love regardless of their background, emphasizing that beyond outer conflicts and divisions, there is a singular truth, the truth of love and unity. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of living. It doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come, yet again. Come, come. Rumi passed away in 1273, and his funeral was attended by people of various faiths, reflecting his broad influence. His legacy includes a vast body of poetry and the establishment of the Mevlevi Sufi order, which emphasizes love and mystical practices like the sama or spiritual concert and the whirling dance of the dervishes. The Mevlevi order became one of the most influential Sufi orders in history, particularly in the Ottoman Empire. Rumi's teachings continue to inspire people worldwide, and his death anniversary, known as Shab Arus, the wedding night, is celebrated every year, symbolizing the reunion with God. The Mevlevi order, based on Rumi's teachings, remains a significant spiritual tradition emphasizing love, music, and the inner meanings of religious practices.